Chapter 7, Zara. Saturday afternoon arrived with a nervous energy that made the entire house feel slightly unpredictable. I had already cleaned the living room twice and rearranged the dining table once. Riley finally appeared at the door, announcing her arrival with the same dramatic enthusiasm she brought to nearly every part of her life. She claimed the kitchen counter within minutes of entering the house, climbing onto it with casual ownership and a complete disregard for basic kitchen etiquette. Her contribution to helping me prepare food for the guests mostly involved eating whatever I had already cooked, while offering extremely confident suggestions about how I should continue. I stood at the cutting board, chopping lettuce for the salad, while Riley swung one foot lazily over the edge of the counter. In her hand, she held a piece of garlic bread that had clearly been stolen from the tray meant for the guests. "You're cutting that lettuce like it personally offended you," she commented while chewing thoughtfully. "I am preparing food for a guest," I replied, keeping my mind on the cutting board. "Yes, but you're doing it with the emotional intensity of someone preparing for battle." I paused briefly and glanced up at her. "You are sitting on my counter, eating the food meant for my guest." "I am performing quality control," she corrected with a completely straight face. I returned to chopping the lettuce, while she continued eating like an unpaid restaurant critic evaluating the menu. For several minutes, the kitchen remained filled with the sequence of vegetables hitting the cutting board. "A strange occurrence unfolded the other night," I said eventually. Riley raised an eyebrow while reaching for another piece of garlic bread. That sentence promised entertainment. "It happened when Harper came over." Her chewing slowed immediately. "What happened exactly?" I kept my gaze focused on the lettuce as I answered. "She kissed my cheek when she was leaving." Riley froze mid-bite. The garlic bread slowly lowered from her mouth as she stared at me with complete disbelief. "She kissed your cheek?" And then the vase in the foyer fell off the table and shattered. I finished chopping the lettuce and placed the knife down. There was a short silence before Riley spoke again. "She kissed your cheek," she repeated slowly. I looked up at her in disbelief. "Did you not hear the part where the vase flew off the table and broke?" "Yes, that is mildly concerning," she admitted. "Mildly concerning? But Harper kissing you goodbye like that is far more shocking." I threw my hands into the air. "A glass vase just jumped off a table," I say. "And Harper kissed you," she shoots back. "That is not the main problem here," I respond. Riley leaned forward slightly with an exaggerated demonstration of curiosity. "How long have you two been secretly flirting?" "We have never been secretly flirting," I said, flabbergasted. "That sounds exactly like somebody with a secret flirtation spree would say," she quips. I turned back to the cutting board, pretending to focus on slicing tomatoes. "It was just a quick peck on the cheek." Riley's eyes widened. "Still counts." "It does not count," I retaliate. She tilted her head thoughtfully. "What did it feel like?" I stopped cutting again. "What?" You heard the question clearly. She folded her arms. I stared at her with growing irritation. "A vase fell off the table by itself." "And Harper kissed you," she insisted. "Those two events are not equally important." I dropped the knife and palmed my face. Riley slid off the counter and walked to me. "Tell me what it felt like," she repeated calmly. "Riley, either help me cook or go home." She placed both hands on her hips with dramatic offense. "Oh, I see what's happening now." "What exactly is happening?" I ask. "You want privacy with your mysterious date today," she smirks. "That is not what I said," I contested. "You should have told me earlier," she continued with theatrical sadness. "I would never have intruded on such delicate, romantic preparations." "Riley," I snapped sharply. She stopped joking immediately and studied my face carefully. "All right," she said more gently. "Let's talk seriously for a second." I waited. How did it feel having someone that close to you again? The question hung between us. I stared down at the cutting board while considering the answer. "It made me feel warm," I admitted slowly. Riley listened without interrupting. "It also made me feel confused and uncomfortable." She nodded patiently. I felt worried about what it meant. I paused briefly. Then it all became overwhelming at once. Riley stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me in a tight hug. "That is completely normal," she said warmly. "For feeling emotionally unstable." I asked. "For feeling alive again," she corrected. She squeezed my shoulders before pulling back. "That is the first step to moving forward." A tear slipped down my cheek before I could stop it. I brushed it quickly with the back of my wrist, embarrassed by how easily the emotion had surfaced. "I don't know if that's a good thing," I admitted. Riley didn't hesitate. "It is," she said with calm belief. Her confidence felt almost unfair. She usually spoke as if the future were a neatly organized map that she could read with perfect clarity. I wasn't nearly that certain. She watched me for another second before clapping her palms together softly, changing the mood with considered efficiency. "All right," she said, returning to her practical tone. "Tell me what you need help with." I drew a collected breath and turned back to the kitchen counter, where the salad ingredients were spread out in uneven piles. "Could you check the lasagna in the oven?" I asked while gathering the chopped lettuce into a large bowl. "I need to finish this salad before our guest arrives." Riley nodded and hopped off the counter with surprising grace. She crossed the kitchen and opened the oven door, leaning down to inspect the dish while I wiped my face with a kitchen towel. The fabric came away damp, and I tossed it into the trash before returning to the vegetables. A few minutes later, the doorbell rang. I glanced at the kitchen clock. 1:30 p.m. exactly. "She's punctual," Riley called from the hallway as she hurried to the door. I remained in the kitchen, adding the final ingredients to the salad while trying to calm the strange nervous flutter that had started building in my stomach. From the foyer, I heard the door open and Riley's cheerful greeting as she welcomed the guest inside. A moment later, Riley slipped back into the kitchen with the same casual energy she carried everywhere. "Well," she announced while reaching for a bottle of wine on the counter, "she seems perfectly normal." "That's comforting," I muttered. Riley grabbed 3 glasses and began pouring wine with focused seriousness, as if performing an important ceremony. "Go," she said, sliding one of the glasses to me. "Take her a drink. I'll handle the food from here." I hesitated. "You're the one who needs to get to know her," Riley added, pushing the glass gently into my hand. She was right. I untied the apron and hung it over the back of a chair before glancing at my reflection in the stainless steel door of the refrigerator. My hair had fallen slightly out of place during the cooking chaos, so I ran my fingers through it quickly, trying to make myself appear at least somewhat composed. Riley handed me another glass of wine and blew an exaggerated flying kiss in my direction. "For courage," she said. I rolled my gaze to the ceiling, but couldn't stop the small smile forming on my face. Then I carried the glass into the living room. Sarah Reese stood near the wall, studying the framed photographs arranged across it. Several of them showed Misha and me during happier years, vacations, holidays, small candid snapshots from ordinary days that once felt permanent. Sarah turned slightly as she heard my footsteps. For a brief instant, I simply observed her. She had striking black eyes that seemed unusually calm, the kind that studied a room carefully before revealing what they were thinking. Her skin carried a pale warmth that contrasted with the darker shade of her shoulder-length brunette hair, which fell in loose waves that framed her face naturally. She stood with confidence, one hand resting casually against the back of the couch, as she examined the photographs. When she noticed me approaching, her interest shifted immediately. "Hi," I said, offering the glass. "I'm Zara. Here's your drink." "Hey," she replied warmly, turning fully to me. "Thank you." She accepted the glass and stepped closer. Before I had time to react, she leaned forward and placed a quick kiss on each of my cheeks in greeting, her smile relaxed and friendly as she introduced herself properly. "I'm Sarah." I smiled politely after handing Sarah the glass of wine, but the expression stayed frozen on my face a little longer than it should have. My brain suddenly emptied at the most inconvenient possible time. All the small conversational openings I had rehearsed earlier in the kitchen vanished at once. I stood there holding my own glass, staring at her as if someone had pressed pause on my psyche. The silence stretched long enough for Sarah to notice. She lifted one hand and waved it lightly in front of my face, amusement dancing in her dark eyes. "Are you all right?" she asked with a soft laugh. I blinked and shook my head slightly, forcing my thoughts to restart. Yes. "I'm fine," I said quickly, feeling heat creep up my neck. I just got stuck for a second. You know how it is when your brain decides to go on vacation, at the worst possible time. Sarah chuckled, the tension dissolving immediately. I motioned to the couch and began walking in that direction, hoping movement would help smooth over my awkward start. "Please, have a seat," I said. She followed easily, and we sat beside each other on the couch. The room felt calm and serene, the afternoon sunlight slipping through the windows and casting soft patterns across the floor. We both took small sips from our glasses as the tension eased into a more comfortable pace. Sarah raised her glass slightly, studying the color of the wine before tasting it again. "This is really lovely," she said appreciatively. "Yes," I replied, glancing briefly at the kitchen door. "Riley picked it out. She should be out here any minute." Sarah leaned back against the couch cushions, turning slightly to me. "That's all right," she said with a relaxed smile. "Let her take her time. I'm enjoying sitting here with you." Her hand moved casually as she spoke, resting lightly on my thigh. The contact caught me off guard. Briefly, the gesture felt strange, almost unfamiliar after so many years without physical closeness. My first instinct was to freeze again, unsure whether I should move or pretend not to notice. Instead, I chose the simpler option and ignored the sudden flutter in my stomach. I focused back on the conversation. We drifted into easy small talk for a while. I explained a little about the veterinary clinic and the kinds of animals I usually treated. Sarah listened attentively, occasionally asking thoughtful questions about the work. At one point, the conversation gravitated naturally to Misha. Talking about her still carried an ache, though it no longer felt impossible as it once had. I shared a few small stories about the restaurant she had built and how much cooking had meant to her. Eventually, curiosity nudged me into Sarah's life. "So, what do you do for work?" I asked. She straightened slightly, clearly used to explaining this part. "I'm an agent," she replied. "I work with professional athletes." My eyebrows lifted. "Really?" She nodded. "I connect them with major brands," she explained, signaling lightly with her wine glass. "Endorsements, advertising campaigns, sponsorship deals. Basically, I help them increase their public value." "That sounds intense," I said. "It can be," she admitted with a small grin. At that point, Riley appeared in the living room carrying a tray of snacks. She dropped onto the armchair opposite us with dramatic satisfaction, as if she had just completed a heroic culinary mission. "Food support has arrived," she announced. She placed the tray on the coffee table and immediately took a generous sip of her own wine. I glanced at her. "Is everything all right in the kitchen?" I asked. "Should I go check on the food?" Riley waved her hand dismissively. "The lasagna is perfect. The salad is ready. The kitchen is under control." Her eyes narrowed playfully. "You, however, should relax and focus on your date." "Ah," I said. "Understood." The three of us sat there for a while, the room settling into a slightly awkward silence that no one seemed eager to break. Finally, Sarah turned to me again. "Can I ask you a question?" she said carefully. "Of course." She hesitated briefly before continuing. "Have you dated anyone since your wife?" Her voice cushioned slightly on the final word. I met her gaze and answered honestly. "Not really." I took a small sip of wine. "You're actually my first date." Sarah blinked. Her appearance altered in a manner I hadn't expected. "Oh," she murmured. She leaned back slightly and exhaled as if the information had suddenly complicated the situation. "Well," she said slowly, "that's a lot of pressure." Her fingers moved to the collar of her blouse as she loosened the top button, fanning herself lightly as though the room had grown warmer. "It's not exactly pressure," I replied carefully. "I've simply waited a long time." Before the conversation could slide into deeper discomfort, Riley jumped in with her usual blunt timing. "Zara has been ready for a while," she said confidently. "And I think it's time we all focus on dinner before the mood becomes overly complicated." She stood and clapped her palms together. "Food solves many emotional problems." Lunch followed shortly after. We moved to the dining table and ate mostly in casual conversation. Sarah seemed polite and attentive, yet a subtle change ran through her demeanor after she learned she was my first date since Misha's death. I could see the hesitation in her posture. As the meal went on, the tension grew heavier. When I finished the last bite of lasagna, I placed my fork down and examined her gradually. "It's all right if you're not interested in dating me," I said calmly. "There's no compulsion here." Sarah peered at me immediately. "It's not that," she said quickly. She folded her hands together on the table. "It's just, I don't think I'm the right person for this situation." Her tone carried honesty rather than cruelty. "I assumed you had already started getting back out there," she continued. "If that were the case, this would feel much simpler." She shrugged slightly. "But being the first step in another person's life after an experience that serious, that's not really my style." Her words landed silently between us. I sat there, processing the strange mixture of disappointment and understanding that followed. Sarah set her napkin carefully beside her plate and rose from the dining chair with calm decisiveness, her mind already made up. She picked up her wine glass, took a final small sip, and offered me a polite smile that felt sincere even if the situation itself had become awkward. "Lunch was lovely," she said, brushing a loose strand of brunette hair behind her ear. "And so were you." She paused briefly, choosing her next words with surprising honesty. "If this had been literally any other point in your life, I would probably already be in your bed," she added with a light, almost playful shrug. Riley choked on her wine across the table. Sarah continued as if she hadn't noticed. "But considering where things stand, I think it's better if I leave before this becomes uncomfortable for either of us." She picked up her bag from the back of the chair and slipped the strap over her shoulder. "It really was nice meeting you, Zara." She glanced at Riley. "And I'll see you at the gym, Riley." Before either of us could properly respond, she walked to the foyer with easy confidence and let herself out. The front door closed with a soft click. For several seconds, Riley and I simply stared at each other across the dining table. Neither of us spoke. The silence grew so strange that I finally leaned back in my chair and let out a long breath. "Well," I said slowly, rubbing my forehead. "That was a disaster." Riley blinked. "A very polite disaster," she offered. "I told you this was a terrible idea," I continued, pushing my chair back and standing up. "I am never listening to your matchmaking advice again." Riley raised both palms in surrender. "Hey, that was not my fault." I crossed my arms. "You set me up with her." "Yes, because she's usually a perfectly normal human being," Riley argued while standing up as well. "She's nice to me at the gym." I had no idea she would suddenly develop a philosophical crisis about emotional responsibility halfway through lunch. She leaned against the table and tilted her head thoughtfully. "Look at it this way," she continued. "You tried." "That's not comforting," I argue. "You tried," she repeated with exaggerated enthusiasm, "and you failed spectacularly." "Thank you," I roll my eyes. "But the important thing," she added, pointing a finger at me, "is that you survived the experience." I sighed and began gathering the empty plates from the table. "Which means the next time will be easier." She followed me to the kitchen while continuing her speech. "In fact," Riley said brightly, "I should probably set you up with somebody else." I turned around immediately. "No." She blinked. "No. There is absolutely no chance you are setting me up with another human being," I said firmly. "From now on, I will handle my own dating life." Riley folded her arms. "At my own pace," I added. "And I will figure things out myself." I pointed out the warning to her very clearly. "Do you understand me?" Riley nodded slowly. "Yes," she said. Then she squinted at me suspiciously. "But I still think it would be faster if I handled it." I groaned. She tapped her chin dramatically, as if considering a complicated puzzle. Then her eyes suddenly widened. "Wait." I scanned from the plates I was carrying. "What?" Riley stepped closer, studying my face with exaggerated interest. "You already like someone." I blinked. "What?" "There is a person," she continued, her voice rising with excitement. "Isn't there?" She clapped her hands together loudly. "Oh my God." I stared at her in disbelief. "No," I said flatly. "There is not." "Who is it?" she demanded. "No one." Her expression grew even more delighted. "Is it Harper?" I nearly dropped the plates. "What?" Riley pointed triumphantly. "I knew it." I burst out laughing in pure disbelief. "No," I said loudly. "There is nothing between Harper and me, do you understand that, Riley? Your imagination is just completely broken." She followed me into the kitchen, while I placed the dirty dishes into the sink. "Come on," she insisted. "You hesitated." "I did not hesitate," I say. "You definitely hesitated," she retorts. I turned on the faucet and began rinsing the plates, while she leaned against the counter beside me. "Tell me who it is," she continued. "There is no one," I counter. "Zara." "Riley." She leaned closer, clearly enjoying herself. "You are hiding something." I rolled my eyes to the ceiling. "Please stop interrogating me." She reached for the wine glasses and placed them carefully into the sink beside the plates. At that exact second, an object shot across the kitchen. A loud crack exploded behind us. Both of us jumped and spun around at the same time. The broom had lifted from the corner of the room and slammed violently against the kitchen door before clattering to the floor. The sound echoed through the house. For a second, neither of us moved. Riley slowly turned to the fallen broom. "How the hell did that get there?" she asked. We both stared at the object lying across the floor. The broom had been leaning against the wall near the pantry only minutes earlier. Now it rested beside the door, as if someone had thrown it across the room. I felt a sudden chill crawl down my spine. I slowly peered around the kitchen. The room appeared exactly the same as it had before. Nothing else appeared disturbed. Yet the uneasy feeling that had been following me all week returned instantly. Fear tightened in my chest, while a wave of panic began rising through my veins.